The Marines mocked her scars until the general saw them and froze.
No one noticed her at first, and that was exactly how she wanted it. The morning sun spilled across the training yard as Marines moved with sharp precision, boots striking concrete, voices clipped, disciplined. Among them stood a woman in standard fatigues, sleeves rolled up like everyone else. But unlike the rest, her arms told a story she never spoke about. The scars were impossible to miss. Long, jagged lines crossed her forearms, burn marks, old shrapnel wounds, some faded, others unmistakably violent. They weren't fresh, but they weren't decorative either. They were the kind of scars you only get when things go very wrong, and you survive anyway. A few Marines noticed. Then they smirked. One whispered to another. A chuckle followed. "Looks like someone couldn't handle the field," one muttered under his breath. Another laughed quietly. "Training accident, maybe? Or just trying to look tough?" She heard them, every word, but she didn't react. She stood perfectly still, eyes forward, posture calm. She had learned long ago that explanations were wasted on people who hadn't earned the truth. The instructor barked orders, sending the unit into formation. As they moved, the whispers grew bolder. One Marine glanced again at her scars and shook his head. "Why would command even let someone like that through?" he scoffed. Still, nothing from her. No anger, no defense, just silence. What they didn't know was this: those scars weren't from training, they weren't from mistakes, and they definitely weren't from weakness. Each mark had been earned far from parade grounds and clean uniforms, earned in chaos, fire, and places where survival wasn't guaranteed. The yard suddenly went quiet. A black staff car rolled in near the command building. Doors opened. Officers snapped to attention. Conversations died instantly. A general had arrived. His presence changed the air itself. Decorated uniform, silver hair, eyes that had seen decades of war and loss. He walked slowly along the formation, inspecting faces, posture, discipline. Then his gaze dropped. He saw her arms, and for the first time that morning, the general stopped walking. His eyes locked onto the scars, not with confusion, not with judgment, but with recognition. His expression changed completely. The Marines who had mocked her noticed it too, and unease crept into their confidence. Because the general wasn't frozen in surprise, he was frozen in understanding. The general didn't say a word at first. He stepped closer. The Marines straightened instinctively, their earlier smirks gone, replaced by rigid discipline. Boots locked, eyes forward, breathing shallow. No one dared move as the general stopped directly in front of her. His gaze never left her arms. He had seen scars like these before, far from training grounds, far from controlled environments. These weren't accidents. They were survival marks, the kind carved by explosions, fire, and close quarters chaos. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted his eyes to her face. "Where did you serve?" he asked. The question cut through the silence like a blade. She answered calmly, her voice steady, controlled. No pride, no explanation, just the truth, spoken plainly, without embellishment. The general's jaw tightened. Around them, the Marines sensed something shift. This wasn't an inspection anymore. This was recognition, the kind that only came from shared understanding, from having been there. The general stepped half a pace closer and examined one scar in particular, a deep burn that wrapped around her forearm. "I've seen this before," he said quietly. "IED flash radius, close." A ripple of unease spread through the formation. The Marines who had mocked her felt their stomachs drop. They had laughed at something they couldn't comprehend. They had mistaken silence for weakness. She said nothing. She didn't need to. The general straightened slowly, his posture no longer casual, his voice heavy with memory. "Most don't walk away from this," he said. Then, for the first time, he looked at the rest of the unit. "Do you know what you're standing next to?" he asked. No one answered, because suddenly no one was sure anymore. The general turned back to her, eyes sharp, searching. "You didn't file for exemption, no special treatment, no mention in your record." She nodded once. "Didn't think it mattered, sir." That answer landed harder than any explanation ever could. The yard was silent now. Even the wind seemed to pause. A general inhaled slowly, then let it out through his nose. His hands clenched briefly at his sides, not in anger, but in restraint. Because now he understood something the others didn't. Those scars were proof of something rare, and what she had survived had changed the way he saw her entirely.
The general didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Instead, he slowly turned his body so the entire formation could see her arms clearly. The scars were no longer something to whisper about. They were now the center of the yard. "These," the general said, gesturing toward her forearms, "are not training injuries." His eyes moved across the Marines one by one. "They are combat scars." A visible shift ran through the formation. Spines stiffened, faces drained of color. The laughter from earlier felt like a lifetime ago. The general pointed to one of the deeper marks, a jagged line that cut across muscle and skin. "Close-range fragmentation," he said, "the kind you get when you stay behind to pull others out." No one breathed. Another scar. Burn trauma, vehicle extraction, under fire. He paused, then added quietly, "multiple times." The Marines who had mocked her earlier stared straight ahead now, their jaws tight, shame creeping in where confidence once lived. The general stepped back and looked at her again, not as a superior inspecting a subordinate, but as one veteran recognizing another. "You could have left," he said. "Most would have." She met his eyes. Someone had to stay. That was all. No heroic speech, no explanation, no justification. And somehow that made it worse for them, because now they understood what those scars really meant. They weren't symbols of damage. They were proof of decisions made in seconds, decisions that saved lives. The general turned back to the unit. "You mocked what you didn't understand," he said evenly. "You laughed at wounds earned where courage is measured in blood and fire." His voice hardened. "Let me be clear. Every scar you see here represents a moment where someone else lived because she didn't walk away." The silence became unbearable. She stood exactly as she had before, still, composed, unbothered. She wasn't looking for apology. She wasn't seeking validation. She had already paid the price. The general nodded once, slowly. And in that moment, the Marines realized the truth. They weren't standing next to weakness. They were standing next to survival. The general let the silence stretch. He wanted it to settle in. He wanted every Marine to feel it. Then he spoke again, slow, deliberate. "Scars don't weaken a warrior," he said. "They mark the ones who stayed when others couldn't." He turned back to her, his voice lowering. "You were never required to carry these into formation." She answered calmly, "They're part of the uniform, sir, just not written on paper." That was when the general did something no one expected. He stepped back, and he saluted her. The sharp snap of his hand cut through the air like a rifle crack. Gasps rippled across the formation. Marines stiffened, eyes wide, shock written across their faces. A general did not salute casually. and he never did it without reason. Then, one by one, the senior officers nearby followed suit. The Marines understood instantly. This wasn't about rank, this was about honor. The general turned to the unit, his voice now firm, final. "You will remember this moment," he said, "not because you were corrected, but because you were taught." He scanned their faces. "You judged scars without knowing the battle. You mocked survival because you hadn't earned it yet." No one dared look at her now, not out of fear, out of respect. The general nodded once toward her, "Fall back into formation." She did exactly as before. No pride, no reaction, just discipline. But the way the Marines looked at her had changed forever. The training resumed, orders were shouted, boots moved again, but something was different. Every Marine there would carry this lesson into every mission ahead. Strength isn't loud, courage doesn't explain itself, and the deepest respect is reserved for those who bear the cost in silence.